This is going to be a description slash demo of how I paint a scene without reference, or at least without reference for as long as possible. I have a desaturated version of the final painting to kind of show you what I see in my mind's eye when I start a painting. If you look at the overview or top right and you squint at it, you'll basically only see light and dark, and a lot of times that'll be all I can pull out of my memory. I'll get a very limited value study of a scene I want to paint. I tried various other techniques like trying to increase my visual library with limited success. Though this is a valuable technique, my impatience makes it of limited use to me. Though having said that, continuous exposure to different scenes and items have helped me with visualizing these things, but my visual library still seems to be composed mostly of coloring books. So I thought there has to be a better way to paint a scene from memory that doesn't look so limited or cartoony. And I'll start painting here shortly with explanation. But the short version is, number one, getting the idea. Whether you get inspiration from pictures, real life, or reading, I'll go into more of that later. Number two, block out the basic scene from memory, even if all you got is an image of dark areas and light areas. It doesn't matter. Number three, use the basic principles of color theory, atmospheric perspective, value gradation, color temperature gradation, etc., to adjust these basic images in step number two. Number four, never use clean lines to draw your scene. Block in the scene and objects with as big a brush as possible. You can always adjust and clean it up later. Number five, and this is my personal preference, just use tons of different textures. You'll be surprised at the different directions or ideas these will give you, though they're not all good. Number six, modeling. This is where you'll be adding things in the appropriate places. As an example, a highlight to reflect a surface. And the appropriate place for that would be on a surface the rays of the sun are striking. Number seven, details are always last. Number eight, your painting almost looks like something. You just need the right thing, but you don't know what it is. This is the time to get the reference and put the finishing touches on your painting. These are the steps that I've taken to finally get to a place where I feel confident enough to be able to produce a piece of work from memory. The idea for this painting is a forest scene with a path running through it. The picture in my mind's eye is a dark foreground and a light background. That's it. I'm using a number of brushes with different textures to add interest to the scene or to spark inspiration as to what else might go good with those textures. Right now I'm just placing random textures and colors around the scene, and the only constraints I have are a dark foreground and a light background. The crosshatch texture for the background trees got me thinking about branches and gaps that might appear in the tree canopies, so I started adding those sky holes in the foreground trees with another textured brush, like a sponge type brush, giving me the speckled skylight through the trees. At this point, I'm starting to think about the foreground values and the color temperature of the foliage. I know this whole section will be in shadow, so the colors will be cooler and the values and the color temperature gradations will be less pronounced. Contrast in general in the foreground will be minimal. Started the background light making it much warmer, yellow gold color, making the warmer light bleed into the background foliage, giving the trees a halo effect. Since light is brighter, and it prompted me to make the break in the canopies brighter, more prominent, which in turn made me notice that I was losing the background trees, so I made them a slightly darker green-gray. If you notice up to this point, I have a canvas full of blobs of color that only vaguely resembles a forest, maybe. I've taken the initial image and using atmospheric perspective, color temperature, and some value gradation, gradually brought the painting along to a barely recognizable forest path, just on the basic principles of realism. I mentioned earlier how I don't worry about clean lines or an exact drawing. I demonstrate here by cleaning up the outlines of trees or by adding more texture and detail, random branches to a bush. The painting is always changing, so it might be better to save the work of an exact drawing for the detail work at the end. Now the painting is starting to take shape. I introduce more trees, nothing definite, just making their presence more solid. Also blocking in more foliage, grasses. These things are still just squares of color. I am mindful of where this foliage is. Being in shadow, it will receive a cooler color. And finally, a fuzzy textured brush to get rid of all the hard edges. Time to punch up the sunlight. A few hot white spots through the trees to exaggerate the contrast, touching up the foliage where the sunlight might hit. Finally started the detail on the foreground trees, and this isn't huge detail. It just has indications, it just shows indications of birch bark, the kind of birch trees I see every day, and judicious use of the fuzzy brush on the bark. I've finally gotten the painting to the point where it looks like something. It just needs that little bit extra to finish it. So this is when I go to the reference. In the reference, I pick out how clumps of leaves sit in branches and the variegated color of leaves. What looks like ground litter from leaves, sticks, or drop seeds. And ground cover, those plants that seem to thrive in pathways and love to be stepped on. These are the finishing touches I wouldn't have thought of, those last little things that complete the picture. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.